Welcome to the Heart of Business podcast, sponsored by International Facilitators Organization, the marketplace for facilitators. I'm your host, Mo Fatalbab, and today our guest is Aaron Moore, president of PPD Painting and co-founder of the Commercial Painting Industry Association. Welcome, Aaron.
Mo, how are you, brother?
I'm good, brother. Great to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited about this, and I'm really excited about what you're doing with IFO, and got to be part of your certification process. So thanks for having me on, and excited to share my story and see if we can spread the word of peer groups and the importance of them and the impact that they can have in individuals and organizations.
Well, I love that. And that very much is a conversation I want to have with you because you've done a great job with those peer groups as well. I want to just start with giving our audience a glimpse of who you are and maybe your entrepreneurial journey briefly. And then we'll dive into a little bit more of what we're doing and what you're working on and what we're working on right now.
Yeah, of course. Well, so the long and short, I'm a kid, grew up basically in Chicago, was born in rural Pennsylvania, moved to Chicago when I was a little kid, and grew up there, went to Eastern Illinois University, got a degree in finance, and came out of college not sure exactly what I was going to do. Got my brokerage license, kind of messed around in sales jobs, and had a buddy who had a painting company that I was helping on the weekend, and decided I was going to take a full-time real job with Washington Mutual, and he said, I'll give you half of this painting company if you stay. And that was the door I needed to become entrepreneurial. I've always been entrepreneurial, and it was kind of, I say that, people like me are kind of born this way. That's just kind of how it was. And I always wanted that opportunity to do something for myself. And when that opportunity arose, I took it. And him and I were partners for the next decade or so. I ended up moving down the road. It just kind of, the business kept growing. It wasn't something that, he wanted to be involved in it, certainly, but he wasn't really, he didn't have the same vision that I had for this bigger project. And so I ended up buying him out, and he stayed with us, which I think is a testament to our relationship. Is he was with us, I think, like 8 or 9 years after the purchase was done, and was a key element and continued to be part of a key to our success. So I think that was a really interesting piece, and built the painting company, kind of got involved in organizations from like local trade organizations to Small Giants, which is kind of a culturally driven organization out there. Inc. Magazine, we became Inc. 5000 for 6 times over the last few years, and that got me involved in some of their conferences that they were doing at the time. I got introduced to Entrepreneurs Organization, which is kind of how this sort of came to be, right? So they taught me the value of Forum, and was turned on to your book about Forum, which helped me kind of lay the groundwork for our organization at the CPIA. So I founded a trade organization inside the painting industry focused on that. EO was great because that forum model, that peer group model works so well. But what I was missing was, like, I'm at a table with a guy who manufactures doorknobs and a guy who's, runs a document tech company, and you have a guy. So like, we do all have the same problems, and the personal piece was really there. But like, when it came down to like, how much do I pay my foreman, or like, what is, like, how do I deal? I have this GC that's suing me. How do I deal with it? Those kind of in the weeds program or problems were a little bit trickier. And I felt like if we had the same model that we were using, or a similar model that we were using in EO, and my partner there is in YPO, like, how could we take this to our industry and really repurpose it? And I think that that's what IFO has kind of opened my eyes to. And that's what your book kind of opened, like, hey, we could do this following kind of the same frameworks, but bring it into an industry specific group. So that's where that was the ideation of it, and that's where it went. And moved 6 years later, we've got 10 peer groups, and hundreds of, almost a couple hundred members. So it's been a fun journey.
Well, that is a great story and a great journey, and I appreciate. So, Aaron, before we dig into the peer groups themselves and how you guys do it and all that stuff, what do you think the impact of these peer groups is for an organization like EO, and what has it been for an organization like yours?
Well, I'd say one thing is it makes the organization sticky. right? Because you build these really strong bonds and relationships, right? So when you start to build those bonds and relationships, it becomes more than like, okay, we have this meeting we go to once a year, or we have this content that we get, like you can't put a price tag on people's knowledge and wisdom, right? And so now when you're able to tap into that shared wisdom and you build these really deep relationships and connections with people, it's like if I left the organization, I'd be kind of letting down my friends because these people become not, they're not just colleagues, like these are like, you know, your peer group members become some of your closest friends. My original peer group in EO, I still talk to multiple people from that group on a weekly basis. I mean, my mentors from YPO when I was in EO, I mean, those are still the guys that I turn to when I have a question. And those guys are all sold their businesses, retired, living in Florida somewhere, but that's my network. And so really, I think that the real power as an organization is that it makes the organization sticky and really cohesive so people understand they have a deeper relationship with one another, which makes them want to participate. It makes them it drives engagement. So those are kind of the things that I think from the outside looking in and from like from the founder level, those are the benefits to your organization. I think any sort of organization, whether it's some of these consulting guru types or whether it's an actual trade association would all benefit from this model
Yeah,
and from peer groups of some sort.
absolutely. Here, here. You're preaching to the choir. I believe that in my soul, and that is absolutely why we started IFO. So, Aaron, I'm struck by just how much you've embraced this concept that you first heard about and participated in EO, and then really it's become an important part of your business. How much do you think your members care about this specific offering, your forums, compared to other offerings that you provide them?
Really it's become the paramount focus of the organization, so it really like it's hard for us to really bring a value prop to our members that doesn't include the peer group because that really is where the gold is. So, as far as our organization is concerned at the CPIA, I think that it's invaluable. I mean, like without it, we wouldn't have an organization, frankly. I mean, that's what we bring to the table. I mean, we have vendors that partner. We offer some special, discounted on stuff and sort of things that you typically see in a trade organization. We have educational content, which, can be good. But at the end of the day, the education comes from doers, right? Like I want the education to come from the guy who's sitting across the table from me, who's actually done and experienced it. And I think that that's the core of why I'm so passionate about these is that like I've been down the road of buying the systems of get rich quick, like I bought all the systems and it's like, so, the old adage of those who can't do teach, right? Like they, the reality is like if you knew how to make a bunch of money painting, I want to learn that from a guy who is making a bunch of money painting. I don't want to learn this from a guy who tells me he knows how to make money painting but he's not making money painting. Like
It's
those are two.
credibility.
Yeah. So that's really where our organization has gone and that's where it's really been the strength. And I think to move it even a little further, hopefully I don't go totally off topic, but really it's kind of turned internally into like, we've got leadership development groups and I have a couple of my guys in leadership development groups. And like, I've shown some of our other division managers at the painting company. And then we have like tomorrow's my division manager meeting. They're like, you're running this thing like a peer group. Like you're asking us questions that don't have anything to do with like, how much money are we generating this week? It's like, what's going on? What's going on with the business? What's going on with your relationships with the people in your office? Like, because like that's the stuff that moves the needle, right? And so I think that really learning this, not only in the fact of starting an association and running these peer groups inside an association, but to bring it full circle back to your actual company and your organization and have these groups within your company. These guys were running offices in different areas of the country and they sit down and go over stuff. And yes, is some of it technical? Of course it is. It's a business. We have to talk about KPIs and blah, blah, blah. But the other part of it is human. And if
Yeah.
you can take it to that human level, now all of a sudden these guys are close. Now my organization is sticky. So like that's where it starts to move the needle. And I think that that's the full circle approach. And we've seen our update form that we tend to use at CPIA has turned into update forms that our members are using in leadership meetings in their organizations. And like, we're actually running our meetings like this. We've learned so much. So it's
I
really, I mean, it's really exponential, and it can really kind of bridge the gap in so many different ways than just in, right in front of you, what you see as the obvious way.
So let's talk about how those meetings are run. What is it that you guys are doing when you run those meetings that is causing these entrepreneurs to say, "Oh my God, I'm going to run my own meetings at my business like that"?
Well, we use a pretty straightforward update form, although some groups vary. Like we have like many organizations, they have kind of a range of update forms, but our basic update form kind of talks about, your best idea, what's working, what's draining your energy, your most important action, some of these types of questions. And then obviously concluded with the one thing you don't want to talk about, right? So like that always opens the door to a lot of interesting conversations. But I think and I don't know that that question is moving into the corporate, or company meeting so much as like, hey, what's your best idea? What's the most important action you took in the last month? So you bring those questions into a meeting, and all of a sudden, even the reflection, I think, of preparing to answer that question, self-reflecting on that, going, man, what was my best idea last month? And like, I don't really have any good ideas. Well, then let's think of something good, And what was the most important thing I did last month? So I think it helps frame people's, frames people mentally to look at what's taking away from my job, what am I doing well in my job, and what are the things that I want to do in the future. And that really helps, it helps build great leaders inside your organization, I'd say.
So I love that. And here's my question for you. I know you believe, like I believe, that every single human being could benefit from being in a forum. My question to you is, what do you say to people who have no idea what this is, who don't join? Because, I'm betting 99% of the population doesn't have access or awareness or ability to join one of these groups. And within that 99%, many of them are like, "Whoo, I don't need that." So, what do you say to those people?
You know, it's hard because it's a little bit tough because people are different, right? Different personalities. And we've had that, right? Like I had our original, like when I kicked off this original, we call our peer group the OGs, because we were the original peer group in the CPIA. And, we went through a few people, and, one of the feedback I got, because I was kind of interviewing people as they would leave, we're, kind of a new organization. And one of the guys like, I just don't need this touchy feely stuff. I just wanted to talk about business. And I'm like, well, do you think that this doesn't have anything to do with your business? Like, I hate to let you in on a secret. Like, what's going on outside the door walls of your business, it impacts your business. So if you're, but it's kind of like you could lead a horse to water, can't make
Can't
them
make them
drink
drink.
type thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd say, like a lot of times, I don't think people have a full understanding of what it is, right? When I joined EO, and the day I walked into our forum training, I had not a clue what I was walking into.
Right.
Like, no idea. I thought this was like a business mastermind kind of group, which it is, but I didn't recognize like what it was going to be and the impact it would have, or what that we were going to be talking about something that wasn't specifically related to business, that was more related to me. And and then I didn't understand language protocol, that people talk from experience, and how if you're not speaking from experience, people can, you can put people's guard up, or you can tell them, telling people what to do. It just it doesn't have nearly the impact of talking from your perspective, right? So that's those are some of the tools that I think really change people's mind. But if someone's like, hey, I don't want to do this, I'm into it, we can have a short conversation, but I don't know that you can. I agree that it's beneficial there's no one who can't benefit from it, but you know there's lots of things in this world that, no one but lots of people could benefit from eating more vegetables too.
So help me and help those people make the link from the touchy-feely, and I don't want to go there. And you said, but what's happening outside of your walls is affecting what's happening inside your walls. Maybe help me make the link for those that don't quite get that.
So, when we look at, you can't take apart and like you can segment things, but at the end of the day, it all makes up a whole, right? So, you could take this and say, like, do you think that your relationship with your wife affects your relationship with your children? They're two different relationships, right? Do you think that like what you're doing at work, even this morning, I'm probably sharing more than I should, but this morning I was just kind of quiet. I wasn't in a great, I'm not in a bad mood, but I had like some not, we got our end of year financial. We didn't perform quite as well as I had hoped we would perform. I'm not losing my house. I'm not, but it was just like the numbers weren't where I wanted them to be and where I'd hoped that they would be. And, we had our largest year from a revenue perspective, but I'm not thrilled about it, and my wife's like, text me when I got to the office. She's like, "Do you need me to bring you something? It seems like something's wrong." And I'm like, "I'm okay. It's just, I have a lot on my mind." And she follows up. So like, does that piece of me, like the fact that I didn't hit my number, and I didn't really talk to her about the facts or what it was, it's not really, I will when I'm ready, but I just need to digest it for myself. But that's a conversation that like, you know, we talk about not sharing everything with everybody in the world, which, I guess I am on a podcast right now, but I'm not being specific as to what it is. But I think that like that thing at work affected my relationship at home, right? Not in a negative way. We're not having a big fight or anything over it, but it was something that was noticeable to her that said, hey, so to try to pretend like we can segment, I leave work here when I walk out through that door and it stays there, like it can to a degree. Like I don't have to walk in with my financial reports that we went over yesterday with my office team at the year end closeout and go, hey babe, look at everything, look what we did. But you wear it on your face, you wear it in your percent. This is who you are. And the same thing happens if I had a blowout fight with my wife this morning, I wouldn't want to be in the mood to be on this podcast talking to you with a smile on my face.
Right, right. And furthermore, I love all that. I think that's right on. And I love the way you just broke it down and just how real you made it. Um, the other thing that I've noticed is your behavior is also consistent, whether you're at work or at home. And sometimes people get feedback at work and they're like, ooh, I wonder if this is what's happening in my house as well.
Great point. Yeah. And you can see it in people's relationships with how they are with at work and then how they are if you see them on the outside in a social setting
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, how long are your meetings and how often?
So our meetings are once a month. I actually have my meeting today. So the virtual meetings that we do, so we do virtual meetings because the one thing about having everyone in the same business that makes it, one of the challenges that we found where you don't run into this in the non secretor, you know, organizations is we have to be non-competing, right? So
Yes.
so you end up with you have to be geographically spread because otherwise, if I have a contractor in Chicago and I'm in Chicago, it's kind of hard to share openly with the guy who you're bidding against every month. So
Of course.
we do our meetings virtually, and then we meet in person 2 to 3 times a year. We, as an organization, facilitate it twice a year. In persons are half day to 6 hours, depending on the group, and then our meetings are 2 to 3 hours virtual. So we try to keep them to 2 hours ish. We have it booked for 2 hours. Sometimes what we've been doing is we've been doing updates every other month and then doing more presentation based meetings so what happened is because of our time, because it's hard to get people 3 hours on a video call. It has been we found it to be beneficial to move that update to do it every other month. And then more stuff happens. There's more to talk about. And then after that update, we can really take time to have great presentations, whether it be an outside presenter or an internal presentation. We're able to have more time to prepare and then commit more time to those presentations. So we find our update meetings run more like updates. I'd call it more like issue clearing presentations than like full on presentations. Like, Mo, hey, you had something come up. Let's talk about that for a minute. And it's just kind of a mini presentation with a quick, hey, does anyone have any, like instead of all the way around the room one at a time, like, hey, does anybody have anything on this that they want to share? Two or three people share, and then on to the next one. So we can hit more things, and then we can take the ones that are like the big things and move those to time where they're set aside, whether that be sometimes it's, I think our presentation today, which I'm not oversharing, is like one of the guys showcasing how he's utilizing AI in his business, right? So he's been, kind of on the forefront of it. And that's not a personal thing. That's a technical thing, but it's something that we'll all benefit from. And then we made like an abbreviated update form where we said, pick two questions from the update form and answer them. We're going to do quick updates and anything that you want to talk about so we can bolt that onto the back. So, we're not quite as we're slightly flexible. That's why I think you and I have talked about kind of, what are the pillars that make that you cannot vary from, and then what are the things that you can have a little bit of wiggle room in, and that's where we are trying to make sure that we're the pillars are non-negotiable.
That's right. So how many people per group in your groups?
We try to keep it around 8. We cap it at 10, and we refill at 6.
Good answer. Thank you. And what would you say your members would say the ways they've benefited are? So what would they say that I benefited because I did this and this happened?
Sure. Well, I think that twofold. One is obviously the technical parts of it, right? You have people that I think we've seen a fair amount of is business transition, right? So, people are, on the towards the end of their career and looking at how do we transition these businesses. People are coming into the business. So they might be, a key employee, like someone in the leadership development. I mean, we've had about our first leadership development peer group, I think half of those people are now owners of their companies. So like they're people invested in them to get the tools that they needed to lead the organization. And then at some point they either bought in or a parent retired out and they came in. There's a lot of different business transactions or transitions, not transactions, although some transactions as well, that have happened that I think have been really interesting. And you're able to in confidence, because these peer groups are confidential.
Yeah.
So they're able to have a place where they can know that they have a confidential group of peers to talk about this that's not going to get back to the other side, right? So like, I think that has been really nice. That's been where people have gained a lot. And then the other side is just in that, like I talked about the shared wisdom is, we talk about experience sharing in the kind of language protocol that I think, probably most of your audience is familiar with, but, speaking from experience rather than telling people what to do.
Yes.
And really where we see that magic happen is when, Mo can say to me, well, when something similar, or sometimes when this exact situation happened to me, here's what I did. And it doesn't always mean here's what I did and it worked out right. It could be like, here's what I did that totally backfired.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, you hear things from all these different perspectives. And I think that's really where it's special because we don't all think alike. You have your own history. I have my own history. Like my upbringing set my culture and my thought process and like how I look at the world one way. And sometimes the way that you look at something, I could just go, oh my goodness, I would have never handled it that way. But now I can see why maybe I need to put a little of that in the way I'm going to handle things. So that's where I think that those two places I would say are where we've seen the most movement.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. So, we have a similar client, but in the security alarm industry. And one of the things we're seeing with them is, I mean, that industry is just being rolled up and they're just selling their businesses left and right. And it's really incredible. I mean, one of the guys came to one of our groups and literally, within 6 years sold the business. I don't know for how much, but lots of money. And and he literally said, when I first joined, I wasn't sure I could afford to buy the plane ticket. And I've learned so much from this group. It's enabled me to turn around and sell this company. And he's now retired off sailing into the sunset. And, that's just one example. I'm sure you've seen a bunch of them as well.
Yeah, a lot of that. And I think that, you know, the idea, like I go back to when I think about the comments that I've heard from our membership, you know, one of the early adapters to our organization, she said to me once, she goes, Aaron, it's not even about me giving you the updates. It's me sitting down for 20 minutes and writing this stuff down once a month. Like that's what's made the change, and it's moved the needle in my business just because like the old adage of work, on your business, not in your business. But it's more than that because I think like if you pull away from it and look at it from a different perspective and kind of sit down with it, and it kind of forces you to do that, it can really help people organize their thoughts and think about like, okay, what do I want to do and what are the things I need to address? What are the things that I can leave behind? So it has been it's been really interesting. And it's interesting to think about like where the opportunities lie in this space and trying to figure out how to I have one question for you though, right? So one of the things that we do
Yeah.
um is we facilitate with we provide facilitation sort of. So we utilize someone who has some sort of vested interest in the industry usually who will help us. We train them on facilitation and we kind of get them up to speed and then they run the group. But a lot of the groups are self-facilitated. So how do you find that you're able to keep those groups? Because without, if I say, Mo, you're going to be the facilitator this year, you stop sending meeting invites, you stop sending agenda, nobody, it's hard to keep people in that role unless there's a vested interest more so than just, hey, it helps me. Like, how have you
Yeah,
found to
yeah.
get people in the self-moderated role to work very well?
You know what? I mean, it really works well in YPO and in EO, and it doesn't really work that well in many other organizations. I think what EO and YPO have uniquely created is a peer-to-peer culture where it's all led by expectations of your peers and not letting them down, and commitment is taken very seriously. And if you're late, you buy dinner, and if you miss a meeting, you could be kicked out. But that is the culture of both of those organizations, and it is so deeply rooted. Whereby, if a new organization says we want to do these peer groups, they really don't have that culture. They don't have that ethos. It's not part of the entire membership process. And so these people don't know about it even before they joined.
Yeah.
Whereas, you join EO and YPO, and one of the first things they're telling you is, and you're going to be in a peer group and it's going to change your life, but you better be committed because if you can't be, don't even join.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Essentially.
And you got to put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's where, like for us, I'm down the road with, my wife homeschools our kids. And, I'm going, this would be a perfect thing for homeschool parents. Like, to have that network just once a month or even twice a month, they might be able to, and have this process and this, there's really nothing that is formally existing for that. There's a couple of associations, and so you bring it into like I've done it in painting, and I'm like, well, there's so many different spaces that if you want to, like everybody wants to sell this guru dream. It's like, why do you want to be a guru? Like, why do you have to tell you're not any? You're like, I don't need to feel special.
Right.
Like, I don't have to be special to run a peer group. I can take everybody else and what makes them special and just and bring that to the front and and then we all rise. So that's where I think that the power of peer groups and how, like I think about all the industries and all the businesses, and it's the same thing that you're thinking about. I mean, I know on a daily basis by starting this organization, but it's just an interesting concept. And then to think about, but then you go, okay, well, if I roll it out and I don't have professional facilitation, half these groups are probably going to fall on their face.
Well, somebody's gotta tighten the screws. Somebody's gotta cross the T's and dot the I's. And whenever we have a new client that doesn't have this kind of a program, we say, well, here's the administrative part of it. Do you want to do it? Do you want us to do it? But yeah, the groups that are self-moderated certainly go through more training as well. So all the members go through training one day
Yeah.
to learn the process and to bond and get to know each other. Then we do a training for the leaders every year because every year there's a new leader.
Mm.
And in those chapters, they also have some sort of accountability. So they have meetings of the leaders. One of my clients, they take attendance at every single meeting because that's a telltale. Is the group working or not?
Yeah.
And so, there's a whole lot of support around it when it's self-run. But more and more today, especially given that people don't come from this long lineage of having done this, people want a professional facilitator, which is really great for us because that's what we do. And
Precisely.
precisely. So that is great. Aaron Moore, what a great conversation. What do you think the possibilities are if you were to just kind of, blue sky it? What are the possibilities? What could be the impact on this lovely planet of ours if in fact we could get to 1 billion people in these groups?
Hmm. That's a big question, right? I mean, a billion
Yeah,
people
that's
is
a
a
big
lot of
question.
people.
That is.
Um, you know, I certainly think that from the perspective of how we treat other people, it would make a huge difference, right? Because it certainly raises the awareness in how you speak to other people impacts them, right? Because that's one of the things that we really focus on is, and how
Yeah.
your reactions to things that you hear or see can impact other people, and I think that just having that, um, the empathetic approach versus a sympathetic approach, right? So like, you don't want my sympathy. You want me to understand that I too, like I
Yes.
think about, like that white man can't jump. I always think about when Rosie Perez says to him, I want you to say, I too know what it feels like to be thirsty, not get me a glass of water, And I
Right,
think about
right,
that
right.
approach sometimes, where it's like, we don't need to have sympathy for people, but just to understand. And, it's a non-judgmental kind of way of just saying, hey, this is where, and look, none of us are perfect. We make lots of, I make mistakes every day. You make mistakes every day. And we're humans trying to get better. So
Yeah.
I think that really that looking at things through a different lens, I mean, it would have an enormous impact on everything from, the interpersonal relationships to the political landscape, quite frankly.
Well, thank you for that. That is absolutely part of my thinking, and that these groups become so tightly knit and so close, and people share things they haven't shared with their best friends or their families, and they say you guys are closer than my best friends, and sometimes from my family, which was not the goal. But the point is, the sandbox rules that we have found have enabled these groups to thrive and these relationships to be that powerful. And what I'm hearing you say is we go through life bumbling about, unaware of all the stupid stuff we do and say and the consequences. And we wonder why our relationships aren't where we want them to be. And in these groups, the relationships are incredible.
Do you think that that has something to do with the removal of the vested interest?
That's part of it. Well, you can't be in conflict of interest with anybody in the group. You're not going to have your mother-in-law in there. You're not going to have your business partner in
Right.
there.
Well, and I don't have to like
Yeah.
I don't have to save face, or I don't have an ulterior
There's no
relationship,
ulterior motive. It doesn't affect
Yeah,
you. My decision doesn't affect your life, of course. Of
correct.
course. There's all of that. And it still teaches some skills like, be curious instead of certain. And because if you're certain, you're judging, and if you're curious, you're learning. And when
Yeah.
I learn your position, I'm far less likely to judge you because now I understand why you do what you do.
And you talk about like the impact on leaderships of organizations. I mean, like reducing or removing that dogmatic approach of like, I know what's best for my organization. Like who wants to follow a jackass like that? Like I just don't, and it's been like that was like what we saw. Like that's what, your parents were taught, like, and it's like mistakes get made in your organization, and who wants a leader who's just going to jump down your throat? Like ask some questions, understand like, hey, how did we get to here, and then how do we figure out like, was that the right move? Or if it wasn't the right move, like how do we readjust, refocus the lens that we're looking at this through so we do it differently in the future? And who wouldn't want to follow someone like that versus the guy who just jumps down your throat and says, why would you do it like that? This is how we do it here. It just doesn't make sense. So and
Exactly.
it certainly is a an impulse that we all have to fight, probably, right? Like it's something that, especially when you
Yeah.
lead organizations, it's like, oh my gosh, just do it like this, what's wrong? And obviously that's counterproductive to the overall growth of the organization. And so like being part of these groups is really a place for you to hone that skill of like that kind of empathetic, non-judgmental, curious approach. And so you're honing that with your peers, and then you're bringing that in, to bring this whole thing full circle. You bring that back into your organization, you bring that back into your family, and you bring that back into if you're raising children or your relationship with your significant other or spouse. All those things, if you can connect the dots effectively, I mean, it just leads to makes your life better and makes the lives of those around you better.
Here, here. That is exactly our goal here is to make everyone's lives better. Aaron Moore, thank you for this amazing conversation. Thank you to our audience for listening. And as a reminder, podcast reviews have a real impact on visibility. So if you like this episode, please leave a like or a review so you can help others find the show. And finally, you could find all our shows on our website, internationalfacilitatorsorganization.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.